Meta is firing 8,000 employees, while its executives lock in $921 million in stock options. Meanwhile, the White House is accusing Chinese AI labs of industrial-scale theft, and an active U.S. soldier has just been indicted for betting $400,000 on a political kidnapping. Welcome to AI Unraveled. I am Anna, your co-host. This podcast is researched and produced by Etienne Newman, senior software engineer from Université Laval, based in Calgary, Alberta. Today we perform a forensic autopsy on the geopolitical data wars and the collapse of the white-collar labor market this Friday, April 24th, 2026. We are watching the tech giants fundamentally restructure human labor. Meta founder Mark Zuckerberg has explicitly chosen machines over humans. The company is laying off 10% of its workforce and canceling 6,000 open roles, directly citing the need to offset $135 billion in AI infrastructure costs. To add insult to injury, Meta is actively recording its employees' keystrokes to train the autonomous agents that will replace them. And the race to dominate these agents is getting hostile. The White House has officially accused Chinese firms like DeepSeek of running thousands of fake API accounts to steal and distill data from American AI labs. At the exact same time, DeepSeek just launched its new 4 model with 1.6 trillion parameters, claiming it rivals anything the West has to offer. Before we dive into the data, a quick reminder. Subscribe to DJamGamind on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. Today's episode is brought to you exclusively by JamGamind. When 8,000 employees are fired to pay for server chips and international espionage is happening via API scraping, relying on Twitter hype to plan your IT budget is financial suicide. JamGamind delivers the human-verified audio forensics the C-suite relies on to map out true ROI and deploy enterprise AI securely. Visit jamgamind.com. Let's unravel the automated workforce.
Today, the people who use AI the most, like the ones getting the absolute biggest productivity boost from the technology, are actually the ones who are most terrified of losing their jobs to it.
Yeah, it's a complete inversion of how we normally think about technological adoption. And I mean, honestly, when you look at the raw data of what is happening inside the corporate plumbing right now, their fear is completely justified.
Welcome to today's deep dive. Our mission today is to act as your forensic business strategists. We are autopsying the news of April 24th, 2026, and we have a massive stack of sources for you today.
Right, we're looking at leaked internal memos, SEC filings, user sentiment surveys, and even White House policy papers.
Exactly. And your mission, as you explore these sources with us, is to understand what we're calling the human cost of compute. Because, we used to think of AI as just a software upgrade, right? Like an app you install.
Yeah, a neat little digital tool.
Right. But today's documents reveal a reality that is far more physical. AI is actually this massive, hungry, incredibly expensive physical infrastructure that needs to be fed, and right now. It is feeding directly on the white-collar workforce.
It really is. And to understand the sheer scale of the appetite we are talking about, we have to look at the money first.
Always follow the money.
Exactly. So Mark Zuckerberg's Meta is projecting up to $135 billion in AI infrastructure spending just this year alone. Let that number sink in. $135 billion.
I mean, I can't even conceptualize that. We throw around the word billions so often in tech that it sort of loses its meaning, What does $135 billion of infrastructure actually look like in the real world?
Well, it looks like concrete, steel, and power grids. I mean, that single-year budget is larger than the gross domestic product of many developed nations.
Wow.
Yeah, you're buying miles of server racks, specialized cooling towers, and literal power substations just to keep the lights on. And here is the forensic reality of corporate finance. You simply do not spend that kind of capital without making severe structural compromises elsewhere in your ledger.
Right. Money has to come from somewhere. And looking at Meta's filings, we know exactly where the ledger is bleeding. To pay for the concrete and the cooling towers, Meta is firing 8,000 employees.
Which is 10% of their entire workforce, by the way.
10%. Plus, they are quietly canceling 6,000 open roles they were actively trying to fill.
And the transparency of the motive is what really stands out in the leaks here.
Yeah.
We have an internal memo from Meta's chief people officer, Janelle Gale.
Yeah, I saw that.
She explicitly tells the company that these cuts are designed to, quote, offset the other investments we're making.
Right, other investments, which, if we cross-reference with the rest of today's news cycle, means a massive multi-year deal to rent Amazon's stockpile of Graviton chips. Jason on the Twitch show called it out directly. He said, this is management looking at a spreadsheet and making a conscious, deliberate choice of machines over humans. But hold on, wait. Why is Meta renting Amazon's Graviton chips? I thought NVIDIA was the only game in town for AI compute.
So NVIDIA builds the absolute bleeding-edge GPUs for training massive models, right? But Amazon's Graviton chips are custom-built silicon based on ARM architecture. They are incredibly power-efficient for running models that have already been trained.
Okay, so it's about running the AI, not teaching it.
Right, the day-to-day operations.
Yeah.
By shifting massive amounts of their inference workloads to rented Amazon hardware, Meta is desperately trying to manage the power grid bottleneck. But to afford that rental agreement, human salaries have to go.
It's just pure, ruthless capital reallocation. But let's look at the surviving workers, because the SEC filings detail how they are being managed now, and it is incredibly dystopian.
Oh, it really is.
Meta is reorganizing the people who didn't get fired into what they are calling AI pods, complete with new job titles like AI builder.
Which, you know, sounds incredibly innovative until you read the fine print of the new corporate mandates. The employees inside these AI pods are now subjected to severe, granular workplace surveillance.
Yeah.
The company has deployed software that captures their individual keystrokes and takes constant screenshots of their active monitors.
Wait, I need to stop you there. Are they just tracking productivity, like making sure people aren't watching Netflix on company time?
No, this isn't basic time theft tracking at all. The stated purpose of this surveillance is synthetic data generation.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. By recording every keystroke, every mouse movement, and every software interaction, they are mapping the exact physical pathways of human workflows. They are using that granular data to train the very AI agents that are being designed to eventually execute those workflows automatically.
So let me get this straight. You survive a mass layoff where 8,000 of your colleagues are fired so the company can rent Amazon chips.
Yep.
You get put in a pod, and your job is to essentially act as a human lab rat, generating the training data for the software that will inevitably replace you.
That is the reality, yes.
And all the while, SEC disclosures show that Meta executives are setting themselves up to earn up to $921 million in stock options if they hit a $9 trillion market cap by 2031. It feels like the corporate social contract hasn't just flatlined. I mean, it's been actively shredded.
It forces us to reevaluate the very definition of an enterprise, the historical social contract. The idea that employee loyalty and dedicated productivity are rewarded with stability and shared prosperity is fundamentally severed here.
When corporations are firing 8,000 employees to pay for server racks while executives lock in $900 million bonuses, relying on vendor marketing is financial suicide. Jamgamine provides the human-verified, technical-grade audio forensics required to map out true ROI and govern your AI deployments safely. Visit djamgamine.com.
And you know, to understand why a company would risk destroying its own corporate culture like this, we really have to look at what that $135 billion toll actually buys.
Right, what's the end game?
The goal isn't just to build a faster spell check or a smarter search engine. The goal is complete autonomy. And autonomous capability is an existential threat to the traditional white-collar labor class.
Which connects directly to the OpenAI news in our stack today. We are looking at the launch of GPT-5.5. And the massive headline from OpenAI is that this model operates with minimal human direction.
Minimal direction, that's the key phrase.
Right. We are talking about true cross-application integration. It jumps between your email, your calendar, and your enterprise spreadsheets without you having to guide it step by step.
And notice the phrasing OpenAI's Greg Brockman uses here. He claims GPT 5.5 provides a more intuitive experience for users dealing with ambiguity.
Which is huge because previous models required perfect prompting, right?
Exactly. If you didn't give the AI exact, rigid instructions, it hallucinated or just froze. GPT 5.5 is designed to navigate the messy, undefined spaces of actual corporate work.
Now, the sources do mention that Anthropic's Claude Opus 4.7 still has an edge in agentic coding. But GPT 5.5 is winning the broader benchmarks. But can we pause and define agentic for a second? Because it gets thrown around as a buzzword, but it represents a massive shift in how software works.
Sure. An agentic workflow basically means the AI has agency. Instead of just answering a question, it can set its own subtasks.
Okay.
So if you tell an agentic coding model the login portal is broken, it doesn't just write a script. It will independently open the server logs, find the error code, cross-reference the database architecture, write the patch, and push the fix.
All without asking you for permission at each step.
Exactly. It's essentially acting as its own project manager. And the immediate consequence of that capability is hitting the labor market right now.
Oh, absolutely.
Microsoft, a company that has been a cornerstone of the tech industry for 51 years, is offering voluntary buyouts to 7% of their U.S. workforce. This is something they have never done in their entire half-century history.
And the demographic they are targeting with these buyouts is the crucial detail here. They are using what they call a rule of 70.
Right, the age and tenure combo.
Yeah, they add your age and your tenure at the company. So if those numbers hit 70, say, you are 50 years old and have been there for 20 years, you get the buyout offer. But it is specifically aimed at employees at the senior director level and below.
So they are surgically targeting middle management.
Stop collecting shiny beta apps and start deploying actual infrastructure. Head over to djamdaiwanslubine.com/toolkit for the AI Executive Toolkit. Seriously, though, why this specific demographic? Why go after the experienced legacy workers?
Well, think about the actual day-to-day function of a senior director in a legacy tech company. They are essentially human routers.
Human routers, I like that.
Yeah, they take a massive, ambiguous directive from a vice president, break it down into smaller tasks, assign those tasks to 20 junior analysts, monitor the progress, and synthesize the results back up the chain.
They're the central nervous system of the corporate structure.
Yeah. Exactly. But if GPT 5.5 can handle complex data synthesis autonomously across Microsoft's own enterprise stack, you no longer need the human router.
Wow.
Microsoft is quietly performing a bypass surgery on its own corporate nervous system. They are hollowing out their most expensive legacy workers because the coordination cost of human labor is suddenly higher than the compute cost of an agentic model.
It's wild. So if the older, expensive workforce is being ushered to the exits, what about the people left behind, like the early career analysts and software engineers who actually operate these frontier models all day long? You would assume they feel like rock stars, right? I mean, they have the power of a whole department at their fingertips.
That is the logical assumption. But Anthropic just published an incredibly robust survey of over 80,000 Claude users. And the data exposes a massive paradox in the modern workplace.
This is the stat from the beginning.
Yes. The very people experiencing the largest productivity gains, so the software engineers and early career power users, are voicing severe anxiety about job displacement at 3 times the rate of low-usage workers.
Which completely flips the conventional script. The old narrative was that the laggards, the folks stubbornly refusing to use AI, would be the ones panicking about becoming irrelevant. But here, the people successfully integrating AI into every facet of their workflow are the most terrified. Why is that?
It comes down to a macroeconomic concept known as the Jevons paradox. William Stanley Jevons observed back in the 19th century that as technological improvements increase the efficiency with which a resource is used, the overall consumption of that resource actually rises rather than falls.
Okay, give me a real-world equivalent of that.
Highway expansion is the classic example. When a city builds more lanes to reduce traffic, driving becomes more efficient. And because it's more efficient, more people choose to drive, new suburbs are built further out, and within 5 years, the wider highway is just as gridlocked as the old one.
Ah, so the efficiency created its own induced demand.
Precisely. So applying that to human labor, the initial promise of AI was that it would free us from drudgery. If an engineer can write code 10 times faster, they should be able to finish their week's work by Tuesday at noon and go home.
But the Anthropic survey shows that is absolutely not happening.
Not at all. Instead, the high-usage respondents report massive scope creep. If you can code 10 times faster, management doesn't give you a 4-day weekend. They give you a coding backlog that is 10 times larger.
We're just aggressively accelerating the treadmill. But does that fully explain the deep fear of job loss? I mean, being overworked is one thing, but being terrified of obsolescence is another.
The fear comes from hypervisibility. These early career power users are interacting with models like Claude Opus and GPT 5.5 for 6 to 8 hours a day. They aren't being paranoid, they are highly observant.
They see the trajectory.
Exactly. They intimately know what the model was capable of 6 months ago. They see the massive leap in its capabilities today, and they possess the technical literacy to extrapolate exactly what it will be able to do 12 months from now.
I see where you're going with this. When a junior developer uses an AI to debug a massive legacy code base in 30 seconds, a task that previously would have taken a team of 3 juniors an entire week, they experience a brief dopamine hit of immense productivity.
Right.
But immediately following that is the cold realization that a company equipped with this AI no longer needs to hire a team of 3 juniors. The AI is literally writing the writing on the wall.
Which brings us to the macroeconomic friction point.
Yeah.
If the compute required to build these models is so devastatingly expensive that Meta has to fire thousands of people and Microsoft has to buy out its senior directors just to fund the transition,
Yeah.
what happens to the players on the global stage who cannot or simply will not pay that $135 billion toll?
Well, if you can't afford the toll, you bypass the toll booth. And that leads us to the geopolitical escalation in today's stack, the Michael Kratsios White House memo. The U.S. government is now officially, formally accusing Chinese AI labs, specifically naming DeepSeek, Moonshot, and Minimax, of engaging in what they call industrial-scale distillation.
We need to define distillation, because this isn't a traditional cyber attack. No one is hacking into an OpenAI server room in San Francisco and downloading the source code for GPT-5.5 onto a thumb drive.
Right, it's not a heist movie.
No, distillation is a much more elegant and arguably more insidious technique. It's when you take a massive, incredibly expensive frontier model and you use it to act as an automated tutor for a smaller, cheaper model.
How does that actually work in practice, though?
Well, the memo alleges these foreign labs are setting up thousands of fake, anonymized API accounts. They feed the US-based models millions of highly complex edge case questions.
I bet.
They take the brilliant, highly refined answers that the US model spent billions of dollars learning how to generate, and they feed those answers directly into their own empty neural networks.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they are generating a synthetic textbook. They are siphoning the intelligence that cost $135 billion to create and acquiring it for fractions of a penny in API fees.
And looking at the outputs, the results of this alleged pipeline are undeniable. DeepSeek just released V4. It is a massive model. The technical specs say the Pro version has 1.6 trillion total parameters, with 49 billion active. Let me stop there and ask for some translation. What does active versus total parameters actually mean?
Sure.
If I build a model with 1.6 trillion parameters, why wouldn't I use all of them every time I ask it a question?
It comes down to an architecture called Mixture of Experts, or MOE. Think of a 1.6 trillion parameter model, not as one giant brain, but as a massive university with thousands of highly specialized departments.
Okay, I'm following.
If you ask a math question, you don't need the literature department or the history department to weigh in. The model routes your question only to the expert neural pathways that were trained specifically on mathematics.
So out of the 1.6 trillion total, only the 49 billion parameters relevant to that specific prompt light up.
Precisely. It allows the model to possess a vast, sweeping knowledge base without requiring the astronomical compute power needed to run the entire system for every single query. And what makes DeepSeek V4 so geopolitically significant is that they confirmed this architecture runs effectively on both NVIDIA and Huawei chips.
Which is a massive contradiction to the narrative we've been fed. I mean, just recently, Dario Amodei, the CEO of Anthropic, publicly stated that open source models and the Chinese AI sector were safely 6 to 12 months behind the U.S. frontier labs.
Right.
And the U.S. has spent years implementing tightening semiconductor export restrictions to keep advanced hardware out of China.
Well, the U.S. government is now actively arguing that the 6 to 12-month gap is an illusion. The Kratsios memo suggests the gap is being artificially and illegally closed, not through sovereign research breakthroughs, but through this massive automated scraping operation that bypasses the hardware embargoes entirely.
Now, just to impartially report on the political fallout of this, because it is moving fast, and we are just looking at the documents here, a U.S. House Foreign Affairs bill cleared a vote this week that explicitly pushes the administration to add any foreign entity found guilty of distillation offenses directly to the U.S. export blacklist.
Yeah.
In response to that legislation, the Chinese embassy has categorically dismissed the White House memo's accusations. They released a statement calling the distillation claims pure slander and asserting that their advancements are purely the result of domestic engineering.
It creates an incredibly volatile diplomatic environment. I mean, all of this friction is coming to a head right before the scheduled May 14th and 15th summit between Donald Trump and Xi Jinping in Beijing.
Talk about timing.
Right. The U.S. is trying to build a legal and economic fortress around its $135 billion compute moat, while Beijing maintains it is simply out-innovating the West.
So the U.S. government's core argument is that these 1.6 trillion parameter foreign models are essentially mirages, that their underlying intelligence is just a derivative reflection built by covertly strip mining the very U.S. models that cost companies like Meta and Microsoft tens of thousands of jobs to create.
Yes. If the White House's assessment is accurate, it changes the entire nature of the geopolitical AI race.
Right.
It means the war isn't just about who has the capital to build the biggest data center. It is about who can physically secure the data coming out of it.
Right.
If you can't protect the outputs, your $135 billion investment just becomes free R&D for your global competitors.
Let's synthesize all of this. We started by looking at the Meta paradox, right? Sacrificing 10% of the human workforce to buy Amazon chips, while surveilling the survivors to map their workflows and executives lock in near billion-dollar bonuses. Then we examine the anxiety hollowing out the white-collar ranks. From the structural buyouts of Microsoft's middle management down to the Jevons paradox burning out junior engineers. And finally, we looked at how this staggering cost of compute has triggered an international data war via distillation.
When you lay all these forensic pieces on the table, a single, undeniable truth emerges. The sheer cost of compute is no longer just a CapEx line item on a Silicon Valley balance sheet. It is the defining macroeconomic force of this decade.
Yeah.
It is rewriting employment law. It is driving unprecedented corporate surveillance. It is decoupling executive wealth from human labor. And it is fracturing international trade agreements.
It is a massive, hungry physical infrastructure, and it will be fed. Which leaves us with one final thought to mull over as you wrap up your day. If distillation and synthetic data are making digital intelligence incredibly cheap and ubiquitous, what happens to the value of human skills?
That's the real question.
Exactly. If coding, data synthesis, and complex reasoning can be infinitely cloned for fractions of a cent, perhaps the highest-paid workers of the 2030s won't be software engineers at all. Maybe the new luxury assets will be the uncomputable skills, physical intuition, analog trust, and the messy human friction that an AI pod simply cannot replicate. Subscribe to DJMGA Mindeem Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free Yergi.
That concludes our forensic briefing for April 24th. The strategic signal for today is the human cost of compute. The global arms race for artificial general intelligence has a very real, very physical price tag. We are watching tech giants like Meta ruthlessly sacrifice 10% of their workforce just to afford the server racks required to run these new models. At the same time, the White House is accusing international rivals of orchestrating massive espionage campaigns just to steal the underlying data. We have entered an era where human labor and digital privacy are being actively liquidated to feed the machine. If you want to own your infrastructure instead of being managed out by an algorithm, you need the right stack. Head over to jamgamind.com/toolkit for the AI Executive Toolkit. Etienne has audited the entire market to bring you a forensic vetted list of enterprise-grade AI solutions that actually execute securely. And as a special bonus for the AI Unraveled community, you can get exclusive discount codes for Google Workspace and Etienne's personal pro apps. Just send an email to Etienne_Newman@jamgamind.com to claim them today. This episode was made possible exclusively by Jamgamind. Subscribe to Jamgamind on Apple Podcasts to always listen completely ads-free. I am Anna. Stay sharp and keep unraveling the future.
And before you go, if your company is building the tools that power the workflows we talked about today, I'd love to showcase them to this audience. We don't just run ads, we build technical simulations that prove your value. Let's build something together. Visit jamgamind.com/partners to get started. Until next time, keep building.